Chosen one, lock in right now, because a sharp moment of divine clarity is arriving to flip your entire perspective. You have been wondering why certain doors closed and why trusted allies suddenly shifted their energy. The reality is that you were being shielded from a hidden malice, and you're about to see just how far someone would go to attack you if secretly given the chance. By the time this season concludes, you will own your past and move with a precision that shocks those who thought they had successfully sabotaged your path. Let us start at the real beginning, before the losses arrived, before the confusion set in, before you started questioning yourself. Something was already growing inside you. You felt it. It was a sense of purpose you could not fully explain. It was a quiet knowing that you were built for something significant, not arrogance. Just a deep, settled, unshakable awareness that there was something living inside you that had not yet been fully released. Call it your gift. Call it your inner vault. It is the place where your real potential lives. It is the ideas that surface in your quietest hours. It is the things you build when nobody else is watching. It is the vision you have been carrying that you have not yet been able to fully execute. It is the energy that radiates from you even when you are simply existing, not performing, not trying, just being. That thing in you is real. It is substantial. And here is where things begin to get very interesting. You were not the only one who could sense it. Someone else sensed it too. Long before any results were visible on the outside, long before anything you were building had taken a form anyone else could see. This person could detect potential on you the same way a trained tracker does not need to see the trail to know exactly where it leads. This person clocked you, studied you, and then very quietly and very deliberately moved in close. And here is the part nobody talks about honestly. This person was not a random encounter. This was not a stranger who wandered into your life by coincidence. This was someone close enough to hear you talk about your dreams, close enough to observe the early stages of what you were building, close enough to sit right beside you, wear a smile, and perform celebration while quietly calculating exactly what you had and calculating how to ensure you never fully accessed it. That closeness was the strategy. Your openness, the very generosity that defines who you are, was the entrance point, and you are about to understand exactly why that matters. Nobody discusses this part honestly, so I will. The person who came against you did not announce themselves. They never do. What they offered you was a mask, and not just any mask. It was the exact presentation you needed to see in that particular season of your life. They showed up as the loyal companion when you were lonely. They performed the role of the supportive presence when you needed encouragement. They became the one who always arrived when everyone else had already left. This person studied what made you respond with trust, what made you feel genuinely safe, what made you lower your guard. And then the performance began in full. Here is something important you need to accept. The warmth you felt from this person was not entirely fabricated. The laughter was real. Some of the good moments were genuine. And that is precisely what makes this so disorienting when the truth finally surfaces. You are not dealing with someone who was cold and obvious. You are dealing with someone who was warm and calculated at the same time. That particular combination is far more dangerous than open hostility could ever be. Now consider what that kind of sustained performance actually requires. Think about the level of daily intention it takes to consistently show up wearing a face that is not yours, to speak words you do not mean, to celebrate someone you are quietly working to undermine. That degree of sustained deception does not happen by accident. It requires focus. It requires rehearsal. It requires a deliberate daily decision to keep choosing the lie over and over again. That truth tells you something critical about what was done to you. It was not impulsive. It was not a single moment of weakness or a poorly timed bad decision. It was a sustained, premeditated campaign. Every conversation, every interaction, every gesture of warmth that was performed for your benefit was a conscious act of manipulation dressed as genuine care. The same person who looked you directly in the eye and declared they were in your corner was the same person who, the moment your back was turned, was actively working to make sure your back stayed pressed against a wall. That is the full picture. That is the true extent of how far the willingness to harm you actually reached. The same intelligence that was used to gain access to you is the very intelligence that is about to expose this person. When a person operates from sustained deception, they are forced to maintain too many versions of themselves at the same time. Too many lies require tracking. Too many roles require performance. That kind of ongoing maintenance carries a cumulative weight that eventually becomes impossible to hold. Without warning, the mask begins to slip. Hold on to that. It becomes very important as we move forward. Now we move into the season you know all too well. Things started disappearing, not dramatically, quietly. A blessing here, an opportunity there. Something you had been steadily building toward suddenly stopped responding. And you, being who you are, adjusted. You pushed harder, you prayed, you showed up even when it felt like nothing was working. Because that is what chosen ones do. They do not fold, they adapt. But the losses kept coming anyway. If you felt called by this message, hype this video so other chosen ones like you can be reached. Here is what you need to understand about that season. You were not losing because you were doing something wrong. You were losing because the wrong presence was occupying a position in your life that it was never supposed to hold. That misplaced energy was standing in the wrong position and intercepting everything that was supposed to reach you. There's a strong, clear signal traveling toward its intended destination. Now imagine a wall of deliberate interference placed directly in its path. That signal does not stop existing. It does not vanish into nothing. It simply cannot get through. That is exactly what was happening in your life. Your blessings were already in motion. The problem was that someone had deliberately positioned themselves in the path of everything that was headed your way. And notice what was being targeted. The attacks were not random. They were not scattered. The pressure went directly after the specific things that mattered most to you. The relationships that were building your foundation, the opportunities that were perfectly aligned with your purpose, the resources that would have given you real independence and freedom. This was not generalized interference. It was aimed, and it was aimed with precision, because you do not strike someone's most vital targets by accident. You strike them because you have been close enough for long enough to study exactly where that person is most vulnerable. That precision is not a coincidence. That is your own blueprint being weaponized against you by someone who was supposed to be standing on your side. The divine saw all of it, every blocked blessing, every intercepted opportunity, every seed that should have grown in your life but was stolen before it had the chance to take root. It was all tracked, it was all documented, and the divine, in full and complete control of the situation, was allowing it to happen on purpose. But why? This is the revelation that reframes your entire perspective on everything you have been through. The divine allowed it, not because you were unprotected, not because your attacker carried more power than the divine covering that was over your life. The divine allowed it because you needed to see something that you kept refusing to see on your own. Think about how many times a gut feeling surfaced about this person. How many times did something feel slightly off? How many times did a quiet internal voice say, "Pay attention here," and you talked yourself out of listening? You did that because you are gracious. You give people the benefit of the doubt. You do not want to be someone who assumes the worst without clear, undeniable evidence. And so the divine made a very specific decision. Instead of simply sending you another warning, the decision was made to show you directly. Chosen ones, they never expected this. And they really didn't expect us to keep talking. You've noticed it. Chosen one channels disappearing, videos pulled, voices scrubbed from the platform. The mainstream media is cracking down on us, but we will not give up our voice. And now we have something they truly can't silence. The technology used to suppress consciousness has been reverse engineered, and Destiny Engine is the result. What was once used against humanity is now your ascension weapon. Join Destiny Engine and you're supporting your favorite channels while leveling up yourself at the same time. It's a 360 win. You can now MK Ultra yourself into 5D superpowers. Destiny Engine bypasses the conscious mind and rewrites the source code directly. Reality bends faster. Synchronicities stack. Your nervous system upgrades to a higher bandwidth. Put on headphones, press play. That's all. For $7, you switch sides of history. Click the link in the description. The takeover is internal. Think of it the way a judge determines that the most reliable way to understand the true character of the accused is to give that person the freedom to act when they genuinely believe no one is watching. Give them enough space, let them move, and observe exactly what they choose to do with that freedom. The divine essentially established the terms. You want access to this chosen one's gifts and potential? Fine. Let us see what you actually do with that access. The moment you believe no one is looking, and the moment the covering pulled back even slightly, the full picture was revealed. The attack on your blessings came quickly. The campaign to block your doors accelerated. Other people were recruited into the effort. Actions were taken against you that you never would have believed this person was capable of, had you not eventually been given the evidence to see it for yourself. There was no hesitation once the restriction loosened. There was no internal pause. There was no visible moment of conscience, no sign of conflict about whether to proceed with the harm. The hostility arrived naturally, almost eagerly, as though the only thing that had been holding it back all along was the fear of exposure. That is the person who was standing right next to you, smiling. Let that fully land, because the warmth you received from this person existed entirely in proportion to how well protected you appeared to be. The moment the covering seemed to drop, the warmth dropped with it instantly. The loyalty lasted exactly as long as it served a purpose. What you believed you had was never what it appeared to be. It was a calculated position, and the behavior that followed when the restriction came off was the most truthful thing that person ever showed you about who they actually are. Now you have the evidence. That is what the losses were for. This was never punishment, it was proof. The divine was not taking from you. The divine was building your case. Now that you understand the full picture, look at the situation clearly and without flinching. Someone in your circle was working against you deliberately. This person had a role to play. This person had a plan. And when the opportunity appeared right, when the covering seemed to be down, when the leverage felt sufficient, the move was made. Conversations were happening in spaces you were never invited into. Private information you had shared in trust was handed over to people who could use it strategically against you. Half-truths dressed up as genuine concern were delivered to the very people who should have been standing solidly in your corner. Just enough was whispered in just the right ears to quietly manufacture distance between you and your real support system without you ever witnessing it happen in real time, and in some cases additional help was recruited. Because one person operating alone does not carry enough power to genuinely derail a chosen one, so others were brought in. A plan was built that required coordination, timing, and more than one set of hands working together to execute it. Here is what that coordination looked like while you were going about your life. While you were building, creating, working, staying focused on your vision, your name was circulating in conversations you were never part of. Your plans were being discussed and dissected without your knowledge. People were being positioned around you in ways that were completely invisible to you because you were too busy being genuine to suspect that the people surrounding you were operating from a very different agenda. The private things you disclosed in moments of vulnerability and trust were not accidentally let slip in careless conversation. They were deliberately handed to people who could exploit them at the most damaging moment. That setback that appeared out of nowhere, that obstacle that felt so specific and so perfectly placed in exactly the wrong spot, trace it back. Trace it all the way back to who had the access, back to who knew the details, back to who had been close enough, for long enough to understand precisely where to apply pressure to cause the most disruption. Nothing about what was done to you was accidental. It was engineered by someone who understood your vulnerabilities because you had trusted them enough to let those vulnerabilities be seen. The amount of effort that was invested in blocking you is not a small or insignificant thing. The magnitude of any attack is always a direct reflection of the magnitude of what the attacker perceived in their target. People do not build coordinated campaigns against the ordinary. People do not conspire against the mediocre. The size of what was mobilized against you is a precise mirror of the size of what you carry. The attacker knew exactly what lived inside your potential, and the entire objective was to ensure you never fully reached it. That objective failed. While all of this was unfolding, while you were absorbing losses and questioning your direction and trying to understand what kept going wrong, there was a presence in the background, silent, watching, taking detailed, thorough notes on every single thing that was happening. The divine never left. Not for a single moment, not on the day things fell apart, not on the night you could not make sense of any of it, not during the season when the losses seemed like they would never stop arriving. Through every moment of what you experienced, there was a presence holding a complete and unbroken record of every action that was taken against you. There's a proceeding that has been in full session without your knowledge. Evidence has been accumulating on the table the entire time. Every lie that was told about you, every door that was quietly pushed shut before you could reach it, every blessing that was intercepted while it was on its way to you, every mask that was worn to maintain closeness while the campaign continued behind it, all of it is in the record, every detail. The case is complete, and now the judge has stepped forward. This is the pivot. This is the moment where everything stops being about what was done to you and becomes entirely about what is about to be done for you. Because the same divine power that allowed the attacks for the purpose of revelation is now stepping in for the purpose of restoration. And what gets restored after a divinely sanctioned trial is never simply equal to what was lost, it is multiplied. What was taken gets replaced, not with the consolation version, not with the lesser substitute, but with the real version, the elevated version. The version you were not yet fully positioned to hold before this season, because the refining this season produced is exactly what qualifying you to steward it required. And here is what divine justice looks like when it moves against the attacker. It is not merely that this person experiences some form of setback. It is that the specific things they tried to prevent from reaching you become the exact things that are permanently withheld from them. The advancement they work to block for you becomes the advancement they are permanently denied. The connection they poisoned for you is the kind of connection that dries up in their own life. The door they deliberately pushed shut in front of you closes permanently in front of them. Because what someone deliberately sows into another person's life does not remain contained there. It travels back to its source. That is not your revenge to orchestrate. That is divine mathematics already running its course. Now let us talk about the move you need to make. You have been protecting this person, not intentionally, not with full conscious awareness, but you have been doing it by staying engaged, by continuing to extend access, by rationalizing what you have already seen, by reopening the door that your own discernment had already told you to close. Every time you pull someone back in after the evidence has already spoken clearly, you position yourself as the barrier between that person and the consequence they are supposed to face. And here is the truth that cuts the deepest. When you shield someone who is actively working against you, you do not only delay their reckoning, you delay your own breakthrough. What belongs to you cannot arrive through the same entrance that your opposition is still standing in. Your blessing and the person attacking you cannot occupy the same access point at the same time. One has to be removed before the other can come through. You have to revoke the access. Not through a dramatic confrontation, not through a public exposure or a carefully drafted speech, through a quiet, clean, decisive withdrawal of your energy, your time, and your trust. You step back. You stop feeding the connection with what you have. You let the silence do the communicating that words never could. You remove yourself from the dynamic entirely and allow the divine to complete what was already set into motion before you understood what was happening, and understand what that act of withdrawal actually signals, not to them but to the divine. When you finally step back from someone who has been draining and attacking you, you are communicating something profound. You are saying, I received what was shown to me. I accept the truth of what I saw. I am no longer going to rationalize it away or continue shielding what needs to be faced. That acceptance, that willingness to act on what you know rather than on what feels comfortable, is precisely what unlocks the next level of your life. The divine was never simply waiting for the exposure to happen on its own. The divine was waiting for you to accept it and respond to it accordingly. Those are two very different things. The evidence was always available to you. The only real question was whether you were ready to stop arguing yourself out of what you already knew to be true. The moment you decide you are ready, everything begins to shift. What was being blocked starts to move. What was being held back starts to arrive. What was being intercepted now finds a clear, unobstructed path straight to you. Because the interference that felt like the universe withdrawing from you was never indifference. It was always the wrong presence standing directly in front of what already had your name written on it. Clear that presence out of the way, and watch your life begin in earnest. Now let us connect every insight that has been building from the very beginning of this message. You carried something extraordinary inside you, something real, something unfinished, something radiating potential before it was even fully visible to you. Someone perceived that and moved deliberately close to intercept it. The divine allowed the attack deliberately as a controlled demonstration of character, and what that demonstration produced goes far beyond simple exposure. It goes beyond evidence. It goes beyond any kind of record held in a divine court. It produced something inside you that cannot be purchased, borrowed, or replicated in any classroom or training program. It produced discernment, the kind that only develops from walking through fire and emerging on the other side carrying a permanent cellular knowledge of what heat actually feels like. You now know the signs. You know how performed warmth feels different from genuine warmth when you are paying honest attention. You know what the presence of a concealed enemy feels like in your gut, even before your conscious mind has assembled enough evidence to confirm it. You know the difference between someone who entered your life to genuinely celebrate your advancement and someone who entered your life to study your architecture and locate the weak points. You now understand your own value in a way that encouragement alone could never have produced. This is one of the most counterintuitive truths you will ever be asked to hold. The people who tried to stop you revealed more about what you carry than almost anyone who has ever cheered for you. An enemy who invests that level of sustained effort into blocking your path has already conducted a thorough assessment of you. This person examined your potential, evaluated the threat your full expression represented, and concluded that coordinating a campaign against you was worth the considerable risk of being exposed. That conclusion did not come from someone who underestimated you. That conclusion came from someone who understood exactly what you are capable of and determined that your full, unobstructed expression was genuinely dangerous to them. Sit with that. Write it down if you need to. What you carry is not ordinary. What lives inside you is significant enough that people who operate in darkness considered it a real threat worthy of serious engagement. There is one place that could never be reached, one place where the interference could not fully penetrate, one place where everything that was growing in you kept growing regardless of what was happening in the world around you. That place is your inner world. It is the sacred, private space you enter when the noise finally falls away. It is the desk, the journal, the hours you spend alone with your thoughts and your vision, and the part of you that refuses to die no matter how many times the outside world attempts to bury it. That inner world is the actual location of your destiny, not a concept and not a figure of speech. It is the literal place where everything you are about to step into was first constructed. Every great thing that is coming for you was built in that private space before anyone could see it, before anyone could block it, before anyone could get close enough to take the blueprint. It was conceived in your quiet. It was sealed in your solitude. It was made untouchable by the simple fact that it lived inside you rather than outside you, beyond the reach of anyone who would want to take it or destroy it. This is precisely why the primary strategy deployed against you was always aimed at pulling your attention out of that inner world. The objective was to flood your life with noise, with manufactured drama, with social obligations engineered to drain your energy, with emotional situations designed to consume your mental bandwidth and keep you perpetually occupied with managing external chaos rather than developing your internal vision. Because the one thing your attacker could not access was the creative and generative force that lives inside you. The only available method to slow that force down was to pull your attention away from it, and here is what that strategy required from you specifically in order to function. The chaos only operated as a distraction to the extent that you kept responding to it. Every argument you were drawn into served that purpose. Every emotional crisis designed to redirect your focus served that purpose. Every manufactured moment of confusion that kept your mind processing the dysfunction around you instead of developing what was alive inside you served that same single purpose. All of it was constructed to keep your attention anchored outward, fixed on the noise rather than inward, where your real power is generated. You were so thoroughly occupied with trying to make sense of what was being done to you on the outside that you had less time and less energy available for what was supposed to keep growing on the inside. That was the real objective all along, not just to intercept individual blessings as they arrived. The real goal was to cut you off from the source from which all your blessings flow. Now you see the full scope of what was being attempted against you. Go back to that inner space, lock in completely, build. Everything that genuinely belongs to you gets created from that place first. And what gets created from that depth cannot be stolen, cannot be rerouted, and cannot be stopped by anyone operating at any level of deception or hostility. And now we arrive at where we were always heading. The opening of this message was always pointing to this moment. The beginning was the seed. This is the harvest. Chosen one, remember what was established at the start. You were never losing. You were being set up, not by the enemy, by the divine. You now know who the opposition is. You have seen the mask clearly. You hold the evidence. You understand the attack, the motive, and the methodology behind it. You have developed a level of discernment that cannot be taken from you under any circumstances. Without it, you know exactly what your potential is and exactly what protecting it requires. You understand that your inner world is your real source of power and that your quiet is your most formidable weapon. You know that every loss was a controlled demonstration, not a permanent verdict against you. You know that the divine was present and presiding through every moment of this season, and that the verdict was never actually in doubt, and you know with a clarity that cannot be argued away that your destiny was never in this person's hands. Your destiny was always held by the one who chose you before you chose yourself, the one who perceived what was inside you before you could fully articulate it. The one who allowed the opposition to move precisely because doing so was the most efficient and complete method of showing you everything you needed to see before your real season of advancement could begin. The attack revealed the attacker revealed the stakes revealed your value, and your value was never on the table. It was never subject to negotiation. It was never diminished by what was done to you, regardless of how significant the losses felt while you were living through them. Now here is the part the opposition never factored into the plan. The one element that was always going to make their strategy collapse regardless of how carefully it was constructed. Destiny cannot be stopped. Not through coordination, not through manipulation, deception, or sustained campaigning. Not through recruiting others, closing doors, or systematically trying to prevent seeds from growing. None of what was done against you was ever capable of accomplishing what it was designed to accomplish. Because your destiny does not travel through doors that human hands have the ability to permanently close. It moves through the divine, and the divine answers to no human agenda. Here is the final truth I want you to carry with you from this moment forward. Everything that happened, the attack, the losses, the exposure, the refining, was always moving toward a single destination. That destination is you stepping fully into your purpose, undistracted and unencumbered, without the dead weight of people who were never supposed to hold the level of access they held. That is the real prize. Not only the restored blessings, not only the breakthrough, the real prize is the version of you that operates from complete clarity, the version of you that moves with full power because nothing is being quietly siphoned from you in the dark. The version of you that creates and builds and advances from a place of genuine wholeness instead of constantly absorbing invisible damage being done behind the scenes. That version of you is the one the divine was always building toward through this entire season. The attack was not a detour away from that destination, it was the direct path to arriving there. Everything that was intercepted is being rerouted back to you. Everything that was taken is being restored, and the restoration carries compound interest. Every closed door is being replaced by an opening that your opposition has no access to and never will. Your elevation, your abundance, and your season of full arrival are not approaching from a distance, they are already here. Right now, in this moment of clarity, in this shift that you are standing inside of right now, the people who coordinated against you are about to watch you become precisely what they invested so much effort trying to prevent. Not because you had to fight them for it, not because you needed to retaliate or scheme in return. Your assignment was never to defeat them. Your assignment was to keep building, to keep creating from your inner world, to keep trusting the divine enough to step back and allow the judgment to proceed without your hands in it. And you did exactly that, even when it was painful, even when you did not fully understand what was unfolding around you. You kept building, you kept showing up for what you believed lived inside you, even when the outside world had not yet produced the confirmation you needed. That faithfulness is what qualified you for everything that is now being released and directed toward you. So walk differently from this point forward, not with arrogance. Walk with the settled, unshakable authority of someone who knows exactly who they are, exactly what they carry, and exactly who has been covering them through every season, including the most painful ones. Get away from whoever you need to get away from. Return to your sacred inner space. Build what you were called to build. Let the divine complete what was already set into motion long before you had the full picture. Stop looking over your shoulder at people who no longer hold any power to obstruct anything in your life. Your key was always your faithfulness. Walk forward. Do not look back. Chosen ones do not chase. Chosen ones do not beg. Chosen ones do not owe explanations to the very people who were working against them in the dark. Chosen ones build, chosen ones create, chosen ones dominate their assignment with such undeniable excellence that every person who ever mobilized against them has no choice but to sit in the permanent silence of having been completely, irreversibly wrong. That is exactly where you are headed. That is already who you are. Now go live